Mark Cox, do you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Angela Williams, do you hear me?
I can hear you. Hello. Sam Steele, you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Thank you. How about Kevin Eisentraut?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You see my screen okay?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, welcome back to the spreadsheets class. We We've been talking about advanced Excel, for example, the indirect worksheet function. We've been talking about form controls. Today, we're going to talk about linear programming for about half the class, maybe 50 minutes, and then go back to some advanced Excel. First, sequential decision optimization, a multi-period horizon, time horizon, linear programs with variables linked through time, text verbal production inventory planning. The inventory at the end of last month plus the units produced this month must equal the sales this month plus the inventory at the end of this month. For example, if we started with 75, if we ended last month with 75, that means we start this month with 75. And we produce 700, that is 775. And we needed only 750, how much is left over? Somebody can do advanced arithmetic? 775 equals 750 plus what? 25. We will have such an equation for each time period in the horizon. Pictorially, the inventory at the end of last month, if the current month is January, the inventory at the end of last month plus production in the current month comes in, and what goes out is sales in January plus inventory at the end of January. That repeats for the next time period in the horizon. Cash flow example, cash at the end of last month is 100 plus revenue earned this month is 7, that's 107 equals 1, the expenses paid this month, plus how much cash is left over at the end of this month? 106. And again, show the picture. Let's look at the production example first, and then a financial problem, planning problem first. Let me check my enrollments. $27, not counting me, right? Last night when I was driving home, I saw a guy texting while driving. Texting while driving, can you believe it? It made me so angry, I almost threw my beer can at it. Sequential decision making. If you're a finance concentrator, I urge you to pay attention to the next example and skim this example, and vice versa. If you are an operations concentrator, pay rigorous attention here and skim the next example. I want to show you the types of problems that can be modeled as linear programs with changing cells linked through time. Aggregate planning, short-term cash flow planning. Aggregate planning, perhaps you learned a little about that in core operations. Broad aggregate labor and production inventory levels for major product categories over a season. The Owen Shoes Company manufactures shoes. Our customers are retail stores. We have a 6-month horizon. The Excel file gives the forecast demands in containers. We don't even distinguish between men's shoes and ladies' shoes. We are aggregate planning. We will break down into a specific mix after we finish the aggregate planning. Each container of shoes requires $9,000 of raw material, requires 20 hours of labor. I'll come back to that. We have initial inventory of 2 units of inventory and 45 workers. And I give you some costs and 160 hours per month. Let's use linear programming to find the optimal production inventory and worker levels. We'll deal with overtime hours, production levels, and inventory. Text verbal, choose overtime. How many hours do you spend on overtime in each time period in the horizon? How much do you produce in each time period? How much inventory in each time period? And we'll need to worry about things like production cannot exceed the labor capacity, which is a changing cell. We can have as much capacity as we want, but we have to pay for it. Amount produced in the first time period, amount produced in the second time period, the ending inventory or the units in inventory at the end of time period one. Just to make sure you're paying attention, each worker can produce 160 divided by 20. Each worker on average works 160 hours. And it takes 20 hours of labor. Let's skim this. We'll need to do this in Excel. Time period one in the horizon. Initial inventory plus what we produce must equal demand during the first period plus the ending inventory. Second time period. Entering inventory. Entering inventory means inventory at the end of last month plus what we produce in the current month must equal demand in the current month. And anything left over is ending inventory. We will have to implement that, and we will also have to relate the fact that if you choose to use low overtime or zero overtime, that's okay. But then you don't have very much capacity, and then therefore you cannot produce very much if you choose to use low overtime hours. Backlogging, we'll look at that after we finish the first example. Let's look at Owen's shoes. The first sheet repeats the class pack. So let's go to the second sheet. Remember, the blue-gray is given data. I have 2 units of initial inventory in the cell B4, which is named beginning inventory, abbreviated like that, BEGINV. Holding cost per container, hold cost container, look at the name box. In B5 is 120. Named range, RT, regular time hours per month per worker, on average, 160. $1,700 per month, regular time wages. I hope that makes you appreciate the salaries you will command in the near future. The overtime hourly rate is 16. Labor hours per container of shoes is 20. Raw materials, named ranges, and initial data. Let me choose a better zoom level. And somehow I won't have it print preview. All right, we have 45 workers available during month 1. 45 during months 2 and 3. However, in month 4, we're planning vacations, so we have only 20 workers in month 4. In months 5 and 6, back to the full 45. The hours section. How much regular time hours do we have available? Let's check those calculations. 160 hours per worker per month on average, multiplied by the number of workers, The calculated regular time hours that could be used, 7,200, 7,200, 7,200, only 3,200 in month 4 because of the planned vacations. So we calculate the number of regular time hours we have. The red border cells are changing cells. How much overtime should we use? Currently 0. Production constraints. The red border cells. How much shall we produce? Containers. How many containers shall we produce in months 1 through 6 in each time period in the horizon? The production capacity is the sum of all the labor available in the current time period. I just turned them yellow. Gold on that screen. 7,200 plus whatever Salva chooses for overtime, divided by 20. The capacity is 360 containers. We choose to produce 338. Let me remove the arrows. In the month 2, the capacity again is the summation of the hours in the current month, calculated regular time hours plus overtime hours. The capacity is 360. We choose to produce 360. Let me ask you to review rows 1 through 20, including glancing at these named ranges. I'll give you 3 minutes. So in rows 14 and 15, we have the hours available. Row 14 is calculated. Row 15 is a changing cell, a decision. The production is in row 18. The capacity is calculated. It depends in large part on my overtime hours that I choose to use. The inventory after production, but before demand in row 22. 338 plus 2 beginning inventory is 340. Minus 300 that we sell leaves 40 left over. In the next month, we produce 360. We need 400, but we start with inventory of 40. 40 plus 360 production is 400, which exactly meets demand. Nothing left over. 360 is produced. 325 is available. We need 200. Let me check that. 300 plus 40, 360 plus 40, inventory is 0. 360 is produced. We need 325. No, 360 is produced. We have 325. Let me do something. Let me run the solver again. Ending inventory is 0. I did misspeak. I will color a cell. That's light blue, bluish green, turquoise. Nothing left over. We produce 325. We need 325. We need 200. We produce 325. We have inventory of 325. We need 200. 125 is inventory. Sorry. Ending inventory in time period in month 2 is 0. We produce 325. We have 325 after production. We need 200. Ending inventory is 125. And the next period, we need 285, but we produce only 160. That's 125 short. We produce 160. We need 285, we're short 125, but we have entering inventory of 125, etc. The costs, let's look at the nature of the solution. We never use overtime. It's too expensive. Ending inventory is in the hundreds. 340 in one time period, 400 in the next time period, 325 and so forth. Minimum cost is 14 million. And I record the solution right here and the ending inventory right here. Inventory after production is high, but ending inventory is not as high. Let me ask a rhetorical question and then give you a few minutes to finish this up. In month 2, why is it okay that we produced less than the future demand? In month 2, we produced in large font 360, but we needed 400. Answer that question again for me. In month 2, why is it okay that we produce less than demand? We need 400, we produce 360. Because we had 40 entering, left over from the prior period, exactly. We had 40 entering inventory, or 40 units of inventory ending at the end of last month. In month 2, why is it okay? Because we had the inventory. We use a multiple time period model because a change in future demands can affect how much we should produce in month 1. For example, these are the original demands. In row 35, I copy row 24. If I change the linear program, if I change row 24 to put 500 in month 2 instead of 400, it would impact what I do right now. That's why I use a multiple time period model. I could solve it again and compare the copy of the solution to the original model with the new model. Take a moment to study that, please, and then we'll look at a financial, then we'll discuss it a little more, and then look at a financial counterpart. Let's go on and discuss these equations, these recursive equations. Initial inventory plus production in period one must equal demand in period one plus the ending inventory at the end of period one. Ending inventory at the end of period one plus production in period two equals demand in period two plus inventory at the end of period two. Ending inventory at the end of period two plus period three production equals period three demand plus ending inventory at the end of three. I want you to take a minute and calculate those in your head. And I want to show you that these work fine even when inventory becomes negative. Backlogging means you produce it eventually, but not on time. You produce it in a time period later than when it's needed. Please look at your copy of the class pack. 50 plus 140 equals 300 plus what? Somebody give me a numerical value for that first yellow underscore.
110.
Somebody give me a value for that first yellow highlight, the underscore. 50 plus 140 equals 190. That equals 300 plus what? I'll get you started. Plus minus 110. Inventory is minus 110 at the end of the first time period. And inventory one is minus 110. Let's go back to the class pack. The very same thing, minus 110 plus 350 is 240. 240 equals 500 plus what? We're going to need to do this in Excel.
Minus 260.
Minus 260. I think I heard you say. So we calculate the minus 110. These are the yellow cells that I asked you to fill in. And then minus 110 plus the stated numbers equals minus 260. We're falling farther and farther behind. Minus 260 plus the stated numbers equal what? Minus 260 plus 660 equals 400. 400 equals 400 plus how much? Zero. So we are producing all of the demands in the time horizon. But we backlogged, we produced it later. These recursive equations, they are called recursive because nowhere do you see in this one, for example, let me refer to the highlight. You don't see production in period 1, but you do see ending inventory in period 2, and that is impacted by ending inventory in period 1, and that is impacted by production in period 1. So these are cumulative, called recursive. I'm not going to ask any test questions on that. I will require that you solve several multiple time period horizon problems of the financial or the operations track as you wish. Backlogging, I'm not talking about tonight's dinner. You're not going to wait a month for dinner. But if you finally have enough money to pay for the Porsche or the yacht that you want, you might well consider waiting a month or two to get the ideal one rather than take a crummy one that you don't like. Classical backlogging in operations. Now you do have to be careful. The cost is not a straight line, it's a crooked line. It's a piecewise straight line. If the inventory is positive, it costs you money. Taxes, damage, theft, insurance, obsolescence. The straight line that I pictured does not keep going down and down and down and become negative. There is not a negative cost for negative inventory. There is a positive cost for negative inventory. So that's actually not a straight line, but it's overcome. You can use linear programming by using two separate variables. Let me make a note, 28. Let me give you one more minute. And then we will look at an analogous financial example. Let's go on to financial cash flow planning. I'm picking on Bruce Barry because he's the least technical guy I know. After his 7th beer, he says, I can't stand any more of this touchy-feely. Oh, I want to do linear programming. a comptroller at a large department store. The context is we need to stock merchandise in the store for the Christmas buying season. Many consumers will buy these and charge the goods not to MasterCard or Visa, but directly to us on a revolving credit card, a Sam's credit card, in this case PJ's, Macy's, I think is going bankrupt. But even internet sales people have this problem. We need money for the early months prior to the Christmas season, October, November, and December, when we stock the shelves and people don't pay us yet. And then finally they start paying us. He needed to develop the financial plan for the Christmas buying season. The months are September, October, November, December, January, February, a 6-month horizon to provide the cash. What type of loans shall we make? How much money shall we borrow? And when shall we borrow? Here are our estimated cash requirements. We have actually an excess of cash coming in the first time period, plus 200,000. Then we start hemorrhaging badly. We need 300,000 to cover October expenses. We need an additional 600,000 to cover November expenses. We need an additional 900,000. We need to borrow money. Finally, as people begin paying for their purchases, we have a surplus of 300,000 in January and $1.5 million in February. There are two alternative sources of funds. Short-term loans, by definition, are for 1 month. The amount that the bank will lend us can be up to 75% of accounts receivable. The interest rate is 1.5% per month for the loan. If you borrow money in September, you pay it all back in the next month in October, plus 1.5% interest. Alternatively, you can take out a 6-month loan, a long loan, at the beginning of the very first time period, September, the entire season, and it can be up to 1,000 units or units of money or 1,000. The cost of a loan is only 1% per month. That's a lot less than 1.5%. It's only 2/3 as much. But there is a 1% loan origination fee for the big loan. How much money shall we borrow from the big loan, the 6-month loan? How much money shall we borrow in September for 1 month? How much shall we borrow in October for 1 month? November for 1 month? And so forth. Excess cash in our money market earns 0.4% per month. Let's look at a linear program of this. Maximize the cash balance, the cash account balance at the end of the time horizon. The last month in the horizon is February. I want to have as much money in the bank as I possibly can. In other words, I want to pay as little interest as I can. We do have to meet the cash expenses in each month. There is a variable for the big loan, all caps in algebra. How much do we borrow for the 6-month loan? That will be one changing cell. There will then be 5 additional variables. Loan against receivables for September, 1 month. These are all 1-month loans. Loan against receivables for October, November, December, and January. The last month in the horizon is February. We do not allow borrowing in the last month because you would never have to pay it back. Solver would cook the books. When do you pay a loan back? When do you pay a 1-month loan back? The next month. What month comes after the last month? Nothing comes after the last month. That's an aberration of these discrete time period models. In fact, time goes on forever, but we don't have an infinite number of time periods. We have only 6. We do not have a loan against receivables for February. Remember the Burger King linear program? The model seemed pretty reasonable until you saw the numerical solution. Drink a 1.5 salad dressings and don't buy a salad. That made me realize that the model was no good. If you forgot this fact and included a variable loan against receivables for February, you would see from the numerical solution that Solver would borrow all it possibly could in February and never pay it back. Cash management account calculations for each of the 6 months in the horizon. We will need to set up Excel to do the following. In September, the cash from the prior month is not applicable because there is no prior month. Interest received from the prior month is not applicable. There is no prior month. The loans received in September are the big loan, the 6-month loan, plus the loans against receivables for September. The external cash is 200,000. The interest and fee payments are 1% plus 1% for the big loan. The big loan has a loan origination fee of 1% in the first month, September. And interest, and in addition, 1% interest for the big loan. Nothing for the little loan yet, because the little loan is paid back in October. Loan repayments not applicable. For October, let me see if I need to zoom down a little bit. Yes, I do. I was missing the right. The sum and difference of all these for September equals the cash management account at the end of September. For the next month, October, cash management account for September plus interest on the same, 0.4% interest is earned, plus the loan against receivables in October, minus the 300,000 exogenous cash, minus the 1% interest for the big loan, but not the loan origination fee. The loan origination fee is paid only once at the beginning. The 0.02 minus 0.02 is 1% loan origination fee, 1% interest in September. In October, you have 1% interest. You have the 1.5% on the loan against receivables from the prior month. You have to pay back the principal loan against receivables for September in October. The sum and difference of this row in the table is CM of O. That should be an equal sign. Cash management account at the end of October, etc. Well, let's look at November. Cash management account for October plus interest on the same, plus loan against receivables for November, minus 600, minus the interest on the big loan, minus the interest on the little loan, minus the principal on the little loan, not the principal on the big loan. That's not payable back until the end of the horizon. And this is only November. Equals cash management account of November, at the end of November. Let's look at the Excel. PJ's department store. Sheet 1 simply restates the problem. We've been over that. The accounting method. Below gray is given data. The interest rate on the long-term loan, 1%. The long-term loan in initiation fee, 1%. Interest on the short-term loan for months 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 1.5%. Interest rate earned on excess cash, 0.4%. The limit on the long-term loan is $1 million. We're talking units of $1,000. So 1,000 is the limit on the long-term loan, the big loan. The short-term loan limits are these 75% of accounts receivables which are given. I would like to review this section, rows 11 through 20, column by column by column. And then go through it row by row by row. But maybe we need to lighten up first. The guy asked his wife, what's the difference between complete and finished? She said, when you met me, we were complete. You were complete. When you met me, you were complete. When I met you, I was finished. Subtleties of the English. All right, in these months, cash from the previous month, interest on that same cash, changing cells, the red border for the big loan, the long-term loan and the big loan are synonyms, has one changing cell. The short-term loans have one changing cells for months 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The external cash, exogenous cash, blue-gray data. The sum of all of these minus the sum of all of these equals the cash balance at the end of the month. We will tell solver through constraints that solver must borrow sufficient money so that these never go negative. All righty, let's look first at column 1. I want you to look at row 26. Column 1, exogenous cash flows, 200,000 coming in. We need 300, we need 600, we need 900, 300 coming in, 1,500 coming in. 2A. Let me clear the changing cells. That's not allowed, not in the final solution, because we have negative cash balances. We will tell solver must borrow enough to prevent negative cash balances. 2A, so look, I'm reading row 26. First, I wanted to go through this column, 1. Now I want to go through this column. Let's put 1,000 in the long-term loan and see what happens. Immediately, we have to repay. Look at the greenish, grayish cell over here. We got to repay whatever we borrow at the end of the horizon. In addition, look at these colored cells. We got to pay 2% in month 1, the 1% loan initiation fee, the 1% interest. In every subsequent month, we pay 1% interest, and then we repay the principal. I wrote a note. I suggest you enter 1,000 in D113 and trace dependence. Formulas. Let me do that differently. If whatever you enter in D13 is used in column G and in I18. Let me change the 500, excuse me, let me change the 1,000. That's a little hard to read, so I will remove the arrows. I put 500 in the big loan, D13. I had 1,000 a moment ago. So we repay 500. 2% of 500 is 10,000 and 1% is 5. That's how the big loan interacts through the time periods. Let's zero that out so we can concentrate on, we got 1, we got 2A, 2B, and 2C. Let's look at 3A and 3B now. The short-term loans. Suppose we borrow 1,000 in each of the months of the horizon. I just entered 1,000 in column E. Let me reset my colors so you can see which ones I want to emphasize. Orange is gold. If we borrow 1,000 in September, we have to pay back 1,000 in September. And the interest of 15. If we borrow 1,000 in October, we have to pay back 1,000 in November. Let me trace dependence. Every time you make a short-term loan, you're implying, that's too many arrows. You're implying you have to pay back the principal and you have to pay the interest. Let me remove the arrows and then put different numbers. I asked for, in the short-term loans, 111, 222, 333, 444, 555. If you borrow 111 short-term, you pay back 111 in the next time period. If you borrow 222 in October, you pay back 222 in November. If you borrow 333 in November, you pay back 333 in December. The interest is hard to confirm in your head, but 1.5% of these amounts are given here. So now we've gone through 3C. 4, 5, and 6. The beginning of the month, I'm looking now at B 14, 15, 16, is simply the cash balance at the beginning of October is simply the cash balance at the end of the previous month, September. The cash balance at the beginning of November is the cash balance at the end of October. The cash balance, etc. We have negative amounts, but they're still instructive to see the logic. The numbers I entered in the changing cells are too small. I'm not allowed to borrow that little money because the cash balance goes negative. The cash balance at the end of February is calculated as the cash balance at the beginning of February is the cash balance at the end of the prior month, January. The final cash balance has the double black border. That's what I want to maximize. Let's look at solver. The changing cells are D13 and E13 to 17. Solver found a solution, everything's okay. Oh, and it takes me back to my previous model. I've seen that before. Control V. We max K18. The cash balances are not allowed to go negative. K13 through 18 is the cash balance at the end of the months. They're not allowed to go negative. The big loan cannot exceed the upper limit, and each little loan cannot exceed these gray cells up here. Let me demonstrate something. Suppose I included E18 as a changing cell. Why don't I just copy the format? So now the red border includes, it's a little sloppy. I don't need that horizontal border, but that's not important. Let's go back to solver and tell it the changing cells now include the big loan and the little loans, including how much do we borrow at the end, How much do we borrow at the end of the horizon, in the last period? How much do we borrow in the last time period? Looks like you can go forever. E13 to E18. I don't think I'm prepared to discuss this one yet. There's something wrong if you let it borrow. Oh, I don't have an upper limit. I don't have an upper limit. It would take me a long time, but I would need to tell Solver we need to put an upper limit right here. We did not tell Solver that. You can borrow all the money you want in the last period, so borrow $1 trillion, a Google dollars, 100 Google dollars. That's what Solver is telling. That's a good thing for me to review. That's a symptom. This error message, the objective values do not converge, is a symptom you've left out a constraint. I left out a constraint. In particular, E18 has to be less than or equal to 100 or something like that. Let me give you a few minutes, and then we'll go on to the next topic. It's a powerful technique. Reviewing the next page of the class pack, page 30, one set of variables for each time period. How much do you produce? How much inventory? How many workers? How much money do you borrow and save in the other example? And the recursive equations are quite similar to one another. Let's change topics. Let's go through some advanced Excel. The advanced sum product 1 and 2. I made some slight changes, cosmetic changes, as I prepared for class. For example, I turned this font green. Let me give you a moment to catch up. I want you to open the book, Advanced Sum Prod 1, 2, ADV Sum, ADV SUMPROD 1, 2, mean part 1 and part 2. We have a part 3 coming up in a later class. Motivate the advanced sum product. Small example to illustrate concepts. Let's look at the given data. For the month of January, we sold to these 3 customers, 103, 109, and 282. For the month of February, we sold to these 4 customers. For the month of March, we sold to these 3 customers. The sales reps, Allen sold 912 to customer 103 in January. Allen sold 43 million to customer 109 in February. No, in January. Let's look at this one at where I'm hovering. Willetta sold 96 million in March to customer 103. It's clear that these are labels, Allen and Joe, Walt, and Willetta. A rectangular range of data with labels at the top and at the left. In yellow, those are labels also. Customer number 103 is a label. It's not something I would want to add up. I would never add up your social security number and my social security number. That makes no sense. I would never subtract my phone number from your phone number. Those are numerical labels. Okay, I want to know how much is Joe's sales to customer 103? The answer is 15 plus 185. The answer is 200. To give you an overview, I'm going to set up a series. I'm going to multiply every number in this rectangular range by 1 if it's relevant to the question, and multiply the number by 0 if it's not relevant. You need to see that big picture. I do that, I assume you did the readings last night. The sum product, open parentheses. That's the way you usually start the sum product. Minus minus, open parentheses, B 22 to 31 equals 103. I'm referring to the yellow column. Minus minus, does that equal 103? Yes. No, 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 yes. Minus minus, the range of labels B 22 to 31 equals 103. Star, we don't use commas. Minus minus, C through G 21 equals Joe. Alan and Joe Walt Willetta. Star the rectangle. That's the syntax we will use. We can't use sum if because we're using arrays of different sizes. Let me explain this, although it was explained in the readings. Let me explain it by activating B33 and explaining it in the formula bar. B20, let me do the middle one. C21 to G21 is a bunch of labels. Can you see in the back what I've highlighted remotely? Look at C to G21. It's time to check to see if anybody is still there. Caitlin, you there?
I'm here.
Can you see what I have highlighted in the formula bar, Caitlin?
Yes, I can.
What did I highlight?
The C21 to G21.
Let me minimize that. C to G21 is a bunch of labels, Alan and Joe, Walt, and Willetta. C to G21 equals Joe is a bunch of trues and falses. False, false, true, false, false. We need to convert each true to +1 and each false to 0. We do that using minus minus. That's the conventional way. To force something to be a number, we minus it. Only a number can have a sign plus a minus. We talked about this last class in a similar context. I could add 0. That would convert things that are almost numbers to actual numbers. We could add 0. We could subtract 0. We could multiply by 1. We could divide by 1. All of those things won't change the number, right? And all of those will force Excel to stop using the default character interpretation and instead use the numerical interpretation. Minus water jug has no sense, but minus quote to quote, oh, that makes sense. Instead of quote to quote, it'll change it to -2. Similar concept. Once again, C to G21 is a bunch of labels. C to G21 equals Joe is a bunch of trues and falses. The first minus converts true to -1. But I don't want -1, I want +1. So I use minus minus. All right, we get a bunch of zeros. Oops, I'm in edit mode. The minus minus converts all trues to 1s and falses to 0s. The answers are all 0 and 1 and are multiplied together. I suggest you change this font to green. You don't have to, it's just particularly important. The only time a 1 results is when the both tests give you a 1. 1 times 1 is 0. 1 times 0 is 0. 0 times 1 is 0. 0 times 0 is 0. The answers are all 0 and 1. 912, is that Joe to 103? No, it's not. It is customer 103, it's not Joe. So 912 is multiplied by 1 by 0. And therefore ignored. 1 times 0 is 0. 730 is multiplied by 1 times 0. So 730 is multiplied by 0. 15 is multiplied by 1. We do keep the 15. Basically, every number in the rectangular range will be multiplied by 0 if it's not relevant, and multiplied by 1 if it is relevant. All right, the only time you get a 1 is when both give you a 1. They multiply each data cell in the rectangular range, which zeroes out or ignores all the numbers that are not relevant. And then we add them up. The answer is 1 times 0 times 912 plus 1 times 0 times 730 plus 1 times 1 times 15, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And with the highlighting, I think you can convert to 15. I make a final comment. If you put any text, the sum product with criteria, immediately it alerts you to the fact that something is wrong. Let me put Larry. Not in the label cell. Let me put Larry in the data cell and look at the display. I should have had that display. So again, if you put any text, I put OGSM in the data cell, the answer immediately says, I can't help you. You got to go fix the error. That's pretty powerful technique. I published a paper on this a few years ago, minimizing spreadsheet risk. All right, of course, a more common error would be I5. I meant to type 15. I meant to type 15 or 50 for 50, and I typed 50. Or 3,5, as Europeans often do, the decimal separator. In America and most of Asia, I think all of Asia, we use the period. 3.5 means 3.5, but not to a European. All right. I can email you this file if you want. I hate to overwhelm you with new files, but the fact is, when I prepared for class, I found a better way to explain it compared to when the class pack was due a couple of months ago. I urge you not to take massive scrambling notes. The only thing this says is it's confusing for the rules when you need a comma and when you need a star. Let me back up. The ordinary sum product is the sum product of range, comma, another range, comma, another range. The advanced sum product does not use commas. Look at the large font. I used a proportional font so it would line up. We use stars for arithmetic, for multiplication. I admit that there are exceptions to the rules. I hate to say you can't do that when in fact you can do that. But the rules are confusing, contradictory. So I recommend, look what I conclude. That's too confusing. So I recommend using the minus, minus, and the star. That always works and is not considered unprofessional. But in fact, if you use the comma, you'll get an error. But not in this case. If you use the star and then the comma, looking at the big picture, you've got to get Excel started in the process of converting trues and falses to numeric. Once you get Excel started, you don't have to remind it for the rest of the formula. Comma, comma will fail. It gives an error display. Star is good enough, and then you don't have to use the star successively. But I don't feel like remembering that. You don't need the minus, minus in some cases. I discussed this in class 14. I will email this book to you in case you want it, but it's not really much. It just illustrates the confusion, which I think, I'm not sure, that you would be benefit to have. Let's go on. This is a 2-class topic. Robust design doesn't say a lot. Some banks have 15 million spreadsheets, so that if 1/100th of 1% of those are not updated properly, then that's a lot of errors. Let me not spend too much time here. Spreadsheet risk, of course, I'll never ask you that on a test. I published a paper on it. The chance of something bad happening operationally or financially or in marketing due to the erroneous creation of spreadsheets, revision, or use can result in poor decisions, including failure to identify good solutions. IBM actually stated that according to PricewaterhouseCoopers and KPMG, 90% of corporate spreadsheets have material errors, costing between $10 and $100,000 per month. That seems hard to believe. That's not a recent quote, but I think it is still true. I'm shocked when I go to companies and see how incompetent, I hate to be critical. They call me in, because I give an occasional seminar to Boeing, to Nissan, to FedEx, Johnson Controls, and so forth. But I'm surprised. You guys are all smarter than everybody I meet at the companies. All right, arrays is the next topic. When you use the evaluate formula button, it's going to give you the notation, open curly brace. And then it will give you some numbers separated by commas and semicolons. The semicolon is the stronger punctuation mark. Two ways of writing the same array. 2, 4, 11, 7 is the first row. The second row is 9, 3, 1, 12. The third row is 8, 10, 5, 6. Excel will write that as open curly brace, 2, 4, 11, 7, semicolon, meaning the end of the row. And then the next row is 9, 3, 1, 12, semicolon. Glance at that. And here I've already said this, converts true to 1 and false to 0. Summary. We'll need to come back to this sheet repeatedly. I think I'm going to jump to sheet 5 and show you one more example and then come back to the summary sheet. 5, 50 states. I'm fond of this example. I took it from a project I worked on at the law school. In this example, I took just a few of the companies, about 50. There were actually 8,000 companies that a law school professor was making a study on. I have 50 states: Alaska, Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona, California, Colorado. You don't have to be good at American geography. If you're a visitor from China, you will not be at a disadvantage because you don't know that this is Alaska and this is Arkansas and this is Alabama. Don't worry about that. For each state, I have 5 columns. The current year, last year, so 2021, 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017. That repeats for each of the 50 states. And the TA over there wanted, actually the TA was an Owen School student, wanted to add up all the 2021 revenues. Look at the formula they used. 2021. It adds up column B, 10 to 55, comma, not C, D, E, F. Column G, 10 to 55, comma, not H, I, J, K. Column L, 10 to 55, column Q, 10 to 55, and so forth. It is fully correct, but it sure is error prone. How would you like to maintain a formula like that? And then we decide, well, we really need Puerto Rico in there, and the District of Columbia, and Guam, and American Samoa. In other words, the basic data changes. You don't want to update that, I don't think. I hate to put words in your mouth. Look at what I came up with. The sum product, open parentheses, minus, minus. Close parentheses. We have the rectangle of numbers, B10 through IQ55. That's the rectangle. Row B10, column B, row 10, through column IQ, row 55. And in practice, we had the 8,000 right there. The entire rectangular range is multiplied by, now look at the green shaded cells, row 9. B9 through IQ9 equals J2. J2 is 2021. So that will add up the 13 and the 19th. I can't read the rest of it. It'll add up the 26, the 5, the 18, 2021, and it copies down. That's a non-trivial concept. That's a difficult concept. It's also relatively unknown. Several years ago at an INFORMS conference, INFORMS, Institute for Operations Research and the Management Sciences. I gave a seminar to about 25 attendees, all of whom were Excel instructors or casual instructors. That is, they taught supply chain or sports analytics like Michael Bray does, but this was out of town. This was in Phoenix, Arizona, years ago. So it was none of the other faculty were in my audience. They already knew this stuff. Nobody knew what I was talking about. I take it back. 1 out of the 25 had heard of what I'm talking about, the sum product with criteria. Let's do it again. I do want to add up all the 2021s. I could use this formula. In the paper I published, I mentioned this, I covered this example. The editor allowed me to call that a ghastly formula. I think you'll agree that's ghastly. In the next cell, it's equally bad, and it doesn't copy. We have 5 separate ghastly formulas for the year 2020. See the label 2020? The formula is you add up C 10 to 55, not AB, not D, E, F, G, but you do add up H 10 to 55, not I, J, K, L, etc. It is ghastly. Once you learn this concept, it copies down, and it's a whole lot easier to understand. Not only that, the TA had an error. Look at the syntax: colon, comma, colon, comma, colon, comma. That's the syntax that's supposed to be there. Let's see if I can find the error without referring. Look right here. Colon, 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 comma. Somehow the guy had misclicked and created an error and had retyped it rather than using the mouse. Colon, colon, colon is not correct, and there was an error there. Not surprising. I would probably make an error too if I were using that formula. All right, now let's take a look, big picture. Formula does not copy sum of 50 separate ranges, one for each of the states. In another example, you might have 50 or even 200 or 300 vendors. You'd have a column for each vendor in a 5-year period or a 10-year period. There's the formula. Colon, comma, colon, colon, comma is wrong. That should be that. I've repeated that right there. Let's look at the big picture. Let's look at the summary. I give you 6 formulas, but you really only need to review 1. The other 6 are extensions of the 1. I start with a generic example. I have a rectangular array of numbers. I have labels to the left and labels at the top. For example, array C is the numbers, array A is the labels on the left, array B is the labels on the top. I want to add up all of, well, I use large font, Joe's sales in February. Hard coding for teaching. One general form. Now, occasionally I omit the minus because in fact, you don't always need it. And the rules are confusing. I almost always use it, but I don't want to always use it Because I don't want you to tell your boss in a few years, hey, you need the minus minus there, when in fact you don't. You don't need it. But you need it in this case. In that case, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to sheet 1, motivate, where you can put, you can't leave out both stars, but you can leave out 1 star. You have to, oh my. I see a typo, but I haven't sent it to you yet. You can't leave out the first one. I apologize for that. Using commas instead of stars in both places gives an error. Using a star and then a comma is okay. Using a comma and then a star, maybe I misread that. I'll correct it. It's so confusing that when I went to explain the confusion, I got confused. That's all I can say. I will work on it and send it to you before I go home tonight. That summary. That's not what I'm looking for. Summary.
Professor, we can't see your screen anymore.
Can't see my screen anymore. Oh, I guess I know why. All right, let me go back to here. This is where I've gotten lost before. What do I do in a case like this?
Far left. I mean,
Far left?
Far right.
I can't hear you.
The far right.
That's your right, my left. Okay, over here. You don't want me to go here, do you?
No, on your picture. All the way over, other one. Yeah.
This one? All right, that's where I was, and that's how I turned it off. Share screen, the only screen, share. Okay. Zoomer is okay? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so rectangular range of data with labels at the left and labels at the top. To sum all the data for which labels A equals value 1 and labels B equals another value. The formula is equals sum product, open parentheses, twice. One's for the sum product and one's for array A equals value 1 in parentheses, star, parentheses, array B equals value 2, close parentheses, star, array C. For example, Joe's sales in February, the sum product open. Parentheses, labels equals Joe, star, parentheses, labels equal Feb, star, a rectangular range. Now you can always use extra parentheses if you're comfortable with that. You don't need to. You can always use extra parentheses. Sometimes, like right here, look at I-22. I put array C in parentheses. That's a different point. You can put parentheses if you want, and you don't have to put parentheses. If you're talking about numbers, for ordinary numbers, you can use parentheses wherever you want. But when you're using logical conditions, you absolutely need to put the condition in parentheses. Let me illustrate an error. Let me take this parentheses off. And that's an error message that won't fit value. I took the parentheses out. The sum product open parentheses. Of course, open parentheses for every worksheet function. The sum product open parentheses. Within parentheses, a logical test, star. Within parentheses, another logical test, star, a rectangle. Now we're multiplying a row times a column times a rectangle. That alone is not allowed ordinarily, but Microsoft made an exception for this particular case. I would put the minus minuses there. I would do it almost every time. You could even put the minus minus here. That's a separate point. If I wanted to do the summation of this range, let me make a point to you in case it's not clear. Equals the sum just a hypothetical formula. That's the way we would normally write it. You could do this, maybe the computer's laughing at you, minus, minus, it's not needed. It's absolutely not needed when you're only talking about numbers. It's only needed most of the time when you're talking about numerical comparisons. You can put a minus, minus there. No, you can't, you have to put parentheses. Minus, minus the sum. Oh, you have to put minus, minus the sum. You can't put it there. You have to multiply it by something. Sorry, I ad-lib. So this is missing the parentheses. The answer is 14. 5 plus 2 is 7, plus 7 is 14. That's the formula you have to know, the one formula. Everything else is a special case. The sum product open, and of course close. Parentheses, labels equals a label, star, parentheses, labels equal label, star, the numbers. Let's look at every second one. In this second block in row 27 through 30, I'm talking about a simpler case where you have only one label to check. To sum all the data for which labels A equals value 1 and labels B equals value 2, you do the general formula. But if you have only labels A equals value 1 and you don't have label 2 and label B and value 2, it's a simplified version of it. The sum product of this label only, star the rectangle. You just don't include the middle. You ignore the middle. If the only thing you want is Joe's sales, you don't care about the month, then you omit the middle one. So this one and this one are about the same. And if you want to count instead of sum, it's very similar. Parentheses, labels equals Joe, star. Parentheses, labels equal Fed, star. The rectangular range is not 0. If you made a sale for $0, I don't think you would want to count that one. For example, I made $1 million sale, but this May the customer canceled the sale. I would just, so it went on the books as a sale for $0 by me to Vanderbilt University. I think you would not count it. So that's the formula. You will have to do a little memorizing there. 50 states, that illustrated where I had only one test. One set of labels, the green row equals J2, that's 2021, star the rectangle. Let me give you two minutes. And let me practice accidentally turning off screen share. Stop share. That's what I accidentally did. You come over here. Come over here. I don't see it. More.
Make it bigger. Like
Here?
the window.
So it has to be fully maximized, and there's only one screen, so that much is obvious. Zoomers, you see my screen? Zoomers, do you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
In the next sheet, I give you an example. If this used to be correct, but it's no longer correct, if I use the advanced sum product, I'll catch the error. If I don't use the advanced sum product, I might not catch the error. Notice I have columns A, B, C, D, E, F, X. I hid some columns so you could see the data and the formula side by side. But in practice, the data might be far away from the formula and you might forget, or your assistant might forget. You would never forget, but your assistant might forget. I have data for 2022, that's next year, 2023 and 2024. With these labels, we're a property rental company, Atlanta, Boston, accountant, etc. The answer is supposed to be 0 for here. There is no data for 2021. I forgot to update this one. The yellow one is supposed to be 2022. This one's supposed to be 2022. These numbers are all wrong, as it says incorrect. The sum if the labels in C, that is accountant, department store, discount store, equals X6, that's accountant, then add up the numbers in column D. That's the error. Look at the large font, D. D is not right. D is for 2022. So it's a little bit safer to check the labels within your formula. This is wrong. These should all be 0. Do you agree? Those gold ones should all be 0 because there are no data for 2021. Over here, if I forgot to update the label, our formula says the sum product of column C equals accountant or something like that. Star row 4 equals Y23. That's 2021. Excel can see there is no 2021 data over here. So it correctly tells me 0. In the simpler way, it gives me simply wrong numbers. All right, I don't think I'm going to rush you through this in-class problem. We'll start in-class problem. Oh, but I will keep you for another joke. The worst possible time to have a heart attack is during a game of charades. You know what charades are? I don't think it's popular with your age group, where you act out something. So a heart attack is a hypothetical situation to people your age, but not to people my age. All right, next class, we're going to use the sum product. You'll have to wait until next class. Given this data, Sears sort of exists, Macy's, maybe in bankruptcy protection. Commission from networks A, B, C, D, E. I would like a dashboard for these merchants only. I don't care about network A. I want you to add up these numbers and copy it down to the right. Today we saw a new type of linear programming, multiple time period in a horizon for manufacturing or for cash flow. And we've halfway finished the advanced sum product. Keep up with the readings, please. I see some puzzled faces that I think mean you didn't do the readings. I will email you this file in case you need it. It's got minor changes in the explanation. remember teaching an undergraduate class and I accidentally let them go 30 minutes ahead of time. And as soon as I said, that's okay, I blinked and everybody ran out of the room. And it's like, wait, it's not time.